Got a lot to talk about today. Another judge in San Francisco in the Ninth Circuit blocking Department of Justice leader, the Attorney General Jeff Sessions, and Donald Trump attempting to block funding to lawless mayors who are harboring criminals in their sanctuary cities effort, and your taxpayer dollars going to support lawlessness and criminality. The president tries to stop it. The attorney general says he's had enough. And some unnamed, unelected judge appointed by Barack Obama stops the entire process of our Constitution. Unbelievable. This country under siege now. Forget the deep state. That's bureaucrats. These are judges who basically are taking everything into their own hands and deciding they're going to be the resistance to Trump. One of the most unbelievable things that I've seen. We're going to be talking about that today, and we're going to go into trade relations as well. Let me get a couple texts here. Steve from Virginia Beach says, whatever happened to innocents who proven guilty in this country? Steve from Virginia Beach. Steve, I'm not sure what the context is, so help me out with that. I don't know what you're referring to. But, Colonel Mike texted in and said, wow, no judge stopped what was going on with the IRS or with Obamacare or anything else. In fact, the judges backed him. Unbelievable. Joe from Northern Virginia says Judge Orrick was the judge who stopped the Planned Parenthood videos. Now, you got these liberal judges out there that are just dictating policy in the United States, and it's a complete and utter sham, and we need to do something about it, I'll tell you that. Yesterday, at the press briefing, I was there with Commerce Secretary Wilbur Ross, and I told you that day, the night before, in an on-the-record conversation with conservative media outlets like myself, the president had laid out what he calls his reciprocal tax, but it's basically a tariff plan, a tax on goods coming in. And so Wilbur Ross, Commerce Secretary, okay, so he comes into the press briefing yesterday before Spicer does, introduces him, and lays out this plan to tariff 25% soft lumber coming into the United States. This is important to understand because it's going to get spun by both sides 3 ways to Wednesday. Okay, the liberals are going to hate it because they hate anything Trump does, and the right is going to start their tax, and you're going to be paying more for your house, and lumber is going up, and you're going to start a tariff war, and it's not free trade, and the Heritage Foundation is going to send a white paper, and all the donors that represent the manufacturers that buy the cheap wood, they'll be lobbying around it. Same old story, right? We're in the swamp here. But here's the deal. The provinces of Canada subsidize their logging by the tune of $15 billion. I just want you to get what's happening, okay? So the government of Canada and their provinces, if you're a logging company and a forestry company, you are getting government subsidies to bolster, prop up your industry in Canada. You're getting subsidies. It's subsidized. So your cost of production is offset by $15 billion in subsidies. So they can then produce and log soft lumber at a significantly lower cost than who? United States forestry industry and loggers who are not getting subsidized. So $15 billion means that you can charge a lower price. Does this not make sense to you? Now, what they do in Canada, we don't care. They can do whatever they want. Now, we know the Canadians are mad because the Maple Leafs lost, the Raptors are about to go down to the Bucks, and the Blue Jays are in last place. So we get the fact that they're pissed. Okay, got some mad Canadians out there. I get it. I'm sorry the Caps kicked your butt in Toronto. Sorry. I don't care what they do in Canada. But here's the issue, and it's so important to understand this because the reactive right is going to come after this. And they don't make any sense either because they're funded by the donors that want the cheap stuff. Get it? So they subsidize the production. They then ship the lumber, the softwood, into the United States and sell it on the open market under NAFTA. No barrier. They ship it in. Well, they're able to charge a lower price because it's subsidized by the provincial governments. So what happens is manufacturers that need wood, stay with me, manufacturers that need to buy wood, housing, construction, you want to make a shed, whatever, Lowe's, they buy the cheaper lumber on the market coming from Canada. Why is it cheaper? Because it's subsidized. Canada then sells it in the United States, creates a sub-market, and captures 31% of our forestry industry. Stay with me on this. Captures 31%. So that means that 31% of demand for lumber, instead of being purchased through American forestry companies, they're purchased in Canada, which means we have 31% less soft lumber production, which means we have 31% less jobs. We have 31% less forestry companies. We have people out of work. We have families on welfare. We have chaos in people that worked in the business, and their jobs go away, and the federal government has stood around with their finger up their whatever, letting this happen, and nobody cares about the loggers who are being put out of work. Does this make sense to you? And so Trump says, okay, here's what we're going to do. Those days are over. That party's gone. Here's what we're going to do. We went to NAFTA and we said, this is unfair. And so NAFTA said, well, we can't do anything about it because they brought it to a NAFTA panel. Now, remember, you enter into these trade deals, there's no sovereignty. There's no U.S. Congress making a decision. It's a 5-member panel, 3 of which members are Canadian nationals. So we lose every appeal 3-2. I kid you not. This is how this stuff goes down. I kid you not. So then Trump says, all right, I've had enough. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to put a 25% reciprocal tax on any soft lumber that comes into the United States, retroactive back to 90 days, which is going to create $1 billion in revenue for the U.S. if the same sales are constant. And retroactive 90 days, we're getting $250 million. So now they want to bring the wood in, they have to pay a 25% tax. Now what that does is that evens out the price because the subsidy is about 25%. So now what Canada has to do if they want to ship in the wood, even playing field, is here's what they have to do. They're going to have to raise their price 25% because why? Well, that's the tax they have to pay. Their prices are 25% under U.S. lumber because they're subsidized and our jobs go away. Just follow me on this, please. I know I'm spending way too much time on it, but it is so critical because the misinformation out there is mind-boggling. So that's what happens. So that's what Trump says. I'm done with this. We're going to even the playing field. Now, if you as a manufacturer, you can still buy the Canadian lumber. We're not banning it. But it's now going to be on a par with U.S. You can do whatever you want. And if sales stayed the same, we get $1 billion. Now, what's going to happen is sales for Canada is going to go way down. And so you're not going to get the billion because they captured 31% of the market because they were being subsidized by the provinces. That's what went down. Now, I go into this meeting and Wilbur Ross lays it out, and every question is it going to start a trade war? Why are you punishing Canada? How much is wood going to go up? How much is an increased home going to cost? What are you going to say to the manufacturers that are dependent on the cheap wood? Why didn't you go to the NAFTA panel? Why didn't you go through the globalist law appeals? Why this? Why that? How much is it going to cost? Isn't this going to hurt, the consumer? Or what about the housing market? And all the lobbyists are upset in the housing market. These are the questions. Unbelievable. Until finally, I have to say, Mr. Secretary, right? So we're on TV. Mr. Secretary, it's my understanding, so I finally get a question. It's my understanding that the purpose of the reciprocal tax or the tariff is to save and create additional American jobs in the forestry industry and the logging industry. That's the objective of it, right? Yes. Okay, so can you tell us, can we change, I didn't say this, but I'm trying to change the narrative. Can you tell us, Mr. Secretary, how many jobs in the United States in the logging and forestry industry, how many jobs is this going to save that are on the chopping block and bring back that have already been laid off? Because if it's an even playing field, the dynamics are going to change. You're not going to get Canadians cornering 31% of our lumber market. That's not going to happen. Maybe it's 5%. It's not going to be 31. How many jobs is that? Now, should that not be what they lead with? So the secretary says, well, it's going to be a lot of jobs. And I'm like, great. Follow-up question. Can you give us an economic number? If you can't give me the number of jobs it's going to save, can you give me an economic number of loggers' income that are going to come back? No. And I'm thinking to myself, this is why you're losing the argument. This is why our side in this always loses the argument. This has nothing to do with punishing China or we're mid or it's unfair. It has everything to do with one thing. Our jobs get screwed, our workers get screwed because of unfair trade practices that our federal government looks the other way because why? The housing lobby and the lobbyists of manufacturers that buy lumber, just get this, what happens. So what they do is they lobby Congress and other officials, and they put money in their campaign packs and coffers because they want to buy the cheaper lumber. That's it. Who is looking out for the U.S. worker? Nobody. Until now. So that's how this whole thing went down. And then the president doubles down on it and says, hey, we got another problem with NAFTA and these people, and that's dairy. They do the same thing. They subsidize dairy. They send milk and cheese to the United States. We buy it cheaper. Our dairy farmers try to get into Canada. They have to pay a tax. No tax for us, big tax for them. So people are buying their milk, and our dairy farmers can't trade or export their dairy products into Canada because of the 80% tariff they have. 80%. So basically, a carton of milk going to Canada from the U.S. is going to have to be 80% higher. How can you compete with that? And we stand around and do nothing until now. I hope this makes sense to people. You're probably saying, well, I'd rather sound like... And it was amazing to me that it took me, literally in this press conference, you can check the tape, it took me 15 minutes to get a question in to try to change the narrative, and then they don't have the answer. It's like, how could you not have the answer to this? This is why you're doing it. It really shows you this trade thing, the reason why, and I spent an entire segment on it, and I'm sorry, the reason the globalist and the cheap labor slave trade network has been able to survive is because we have so few people in America who can articulate the opposite view and put it in layman's terms that everybody understands.